The tax-free savings account is an incredible tool to use for retirement. However, while the account offers many advantages, retirees often misuse their TFSA, resulting in missed opportunities and potential tax consequences. Okay, so the TFSA was originally introduced in 2009 to allow Canadians over the age of 18 to save for their retirement or any other financial goal that they might have tax-free. At the onset, Canadians could shelter $5,000 per year into their TFSA, with the contribution room changing over the years. As of 2023, the yearly contribution limit is now $6,500, giving you total contribution room of $88,000 since 2009. Although it's called a tax-free savings account, you don't have to leave your contributions in a savings account. You can invest the funds within the account in stocks, bonds, ETFs, and mutual funds, providing you with additional long-term growth opportunities. The primary benefit of the TFSA is that any income, growth, or dividends generated in the account are yours to keep without having to pay tax. However, there are exceptions to every rule. If CRA auditors deem that you're conducting high-frequency or aggressive day trading, they may determine that your TFSA is being used to conduct a trading business, and all your gains could end up being taxed as business income. Now, this is not a big deal for most retirees because they're not spending their days day trading their TFSAs. So back to the question at hand. What do most retirees get wrong with their TFSA? Generally speaking, retirees will have saved for their retirement through various accounts. Accounts such as pensions, RSPs, TFSAs, and non-registered accounts. When it comes time to withdraw funds out of your retirement portfolio, it's important to have a game plan in place to make sure that you're paying the least amount of tax possible. For many retirees, and I'm not saying every retiree, it often makes sense to pull from their registered and taxable accounts before accessing their TFSA. The primary reason for this is that registered and taxable accounts can cause a huge tax bill upon death. So you'll want to draw them down in retirement while you are in a lower tax bracket. In the majority of plans that we build for our clients, the TFSA is often used at the end of retirement or for estate purposes. Here's a quick example as to why that's the case. Okay, so we built out a plan for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and they were more than on track to have the income that they needed to reach their retirement goals. So since there was no issues with their cash flow, Mr. and Mrs. Smith were in a position where they'd be able to leave some money for their kids and grandkids. So we looked at a few ways that they could draw down their retirement accounts and the impact that that would have on what would be left for the next generation. Mr. and Mrs. Smith were both 60 and had started their CPP. They had already converted their RSPs to a RIF. Since they already had RIFs, there was now a minimum amount that they were going to need to withdraw every year. And lastly, their old age security would also begin at age 65. So the first withdrawal strategy that we looked at involved keeping their tax bill as low as possible in their early years of retirement. So this meant that Mr. and Mrs. Smith would rely on their TFSAs to top up their incomes. Now, once their TFSAs were depleted, they would then have to access their non-registered accounts. And once their non-registered accounts were depleted, they'd have to make extra withdrawals from their RIF to top themselves up. Now, in this scenario, Mr. and Mrs. Smith would leave an estate after tax of $2.12 million. The second withdrawal strategy that we reviewed involved them drawing on their high tax accounts first. Again, all the same info as before with CPP, old age security, and withdrawing the RIF minimum. But in this scenario, they would top up their incomes from their RIFs initially. Now, once the RIFs were depleted, they would rely on their non-registered accounts, leaving their TFSAs for last. By implementing this withdrawal strategy, they would leave an estate of $2.25 million. That's an increase of over $125,000. Since their TFSAs won't be needed for another 20 years, Mr. and Mrs. Smith can afford to be more aggressive with the investments they choose in their TFSA. Now, when I say more aggressive, I don't mean putting their money in penny stocks in hopes of hitting it big. I mean having an increased exposure to a diversified stock market portfolio rather than guaranteed investments such as GICs or government bonds. For example, let's say that Mr. and Mrs. Smith are balanced investors, which means on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being low risk and 10 being high risk, they would be considered a 5 out of 10. Now, over time, investments that are more aggressive will have more volatility, but their expected returns will also be higher. So since they won't need to use their TFSA for many years, they could be more aggressive within those accounts. So let's say that the investments they choose in their TFSA is a 7 out of 10 when looking at our scale. To counteract this increase and keep their overall portfolio at a 5 out of 10, they could decrease the risk in their RIF accounts to, let's say, a 3 out of 10. This also makes sense from a time perspective, as they'll be using the funds in their RIF over the coming years. Overall, their portfolio would still be considered a 5 out of 10. We're just being more tactful with where the more aggressive investments are held. So if you have a TFSA and you don't plan on using it for many years, it could make sense to increase how aggressive you are with the investments within that account relative to the rest of your portfolio. If you're looking for more retirement withdrawal strategies, check us out at transcanadawealthmanagement.com. Hit that subscribe button and we'll see you next time.